So much of this stuff didn't just start today with you having all of this.
No.
You began this as an athlete
Yes.
and your upbringing. So when we all start lifting weights, we come at it from this hyper aggressive, we have to be the biggest, strongest, fastest, meatiest person out there. We can lift everything. There is no off button.
Mm-hmm.
But while you were going through that, becoming an athlete, learning how strength training worked,
Yeah.
you were also in self-realization camps.
Yeah.
You were doing this yin side to understanding spirituality at a very young age.
Yeah.
And I think all of this stuff just kind of slowly progresses to where you are today. Is there any shortcuts to the journey, or, how did the very first time you sat for 20 minutes, an hour, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
when does sort of that breakthrough start to happen of, wow, this intensity weightlifting piece that I'm working on is also very similar to me sitting in silence and doing this self-work? When did you start to connect the dots on the two and start tying the pieces together?
That's a good question. I'll give you a very good answer. Every time I got injured, and I had to say,
Yeah.
what the hell did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And, I was a highly competitive motocross racer. I've had 6 concussions racing motorcycles. I've been very badly injured, woke up in the ambulance multiple times and didn't even know how I got there, and was covered in, scars and rash from sliding 70 miles an hour down a dirt track covered in rocks. And I rode in the rodeo and got trampled when I was a kid. I was a paratrooper, had a very bad left shoulder, almost had my left shoulder torn out of the socket in a parachuting accident. I've broken my left leg in 5 places cliff diving. I've got 4 broken noses from boxing and kickboxing. I broke my left wrist. I broke my left index finger. I've had 2 broken ribs boxing. I told you I had a stunt lifting accident and blew my 2 cervical discs out and tore ligaments in my spine. I've had a variety of injuries from just being young, dumb, and full of cum in a gym and trying to outsmart and outlift much stronger and bigger guys than me. So, even though I was raised by a mother who was a full-fledged yogi and a very consistent meditator, probably hasn't missed a day of meditation in 30 years, and was trained by monks, when you got a lot of testosterone going through you, all that yogi shit, that's just like stuff your mom makes you do.
Yeah.
But my mother and father are farmers. I was raised on a 140-acre sheep farm with chickens and pigs and horses and cows, and we sold produce and we sold firewood, so it was a full working farm. So there's, a lot going on there, and there's a lot to learn there, but what I'm telling you is we go through cycles in life. I basically break the life cycle from birth to death into 4 phases. We have the childhood phase, which is where we're codependent on our parents for everything. Then we go into what I call the warrior phase. When we go through puberty, we enter the warrior phase, and most of the problems and most of this attitude is part of the warrior phase because our hormones are raging and we're trying to differentiate ourselves from our friends and our family and our parents especially. We're trying to say, screw you, Mom, I'm not doing that, or screw you, Dad, I'm not going to do that. And we're trying to develop a sense of individuality, which has to happen or evolution will halt. Mm-hmm. If we did everything our mom and dad did, then evolution would cease. We'd keep making the same mistakes over and over again that they did, and when the environment changed, we'd all be dead. So the warrior stage of development is when we get into all this ass-kicking and trying to prove ourselves, and we're trying to prove ourselves to ourselves, and we're trying to prove ourselves to other people. And so we do whatever we got to do to get a sense of recognition or acknowledgement, which means oftentimes pushing the red line, right? Really going for it, especially for the males and especially for the high testosterone males. Like, I'm a high testosterone, alpha male type guy. Thus the being in the 82nd Airborne Division, kickboxing, boxing, motocross racing. I was a stock car racer. I was a drag racer. I did a lot of crazy shit, rode in the rodeo. All just to prove to the world I was a fucking badass, and to prove it to myself too.
Yeah.
Right? Not just everyone else, but to me, I had to test myself because I had a deep need to know what I was capable of. I really just something, there's a lion in there that wants to hunt, so to speak, as a metaphor.
Yeah.
So then we go out of the warrior stage into what I call the king and the queen stage, and that's when we usually somewhere around 35 to 40 years of age, we've now established ourselves in a profession or a career or a vocation. We can pay our own bills. We usually have our own home, oftentimes a wife and kids. So we have our kingdom, which can be a little kingdom, or it can be, you can be a wild, out of control person like Donald Trump who's, got a big kingdom as a metaphor. But in the king and queen stage, you enter the king and queen stage by becoming an adult, accepting responsibility for yourself, paying your own bills, basically being a responsible, contributing adult, but you have a sense of ownership of yourself, a sense of confidence in your skill, that you're a contributor in some way, be it owning a business, being a craftsman like a mechanic or a woodworker. And you have this sense of, okay, I know how to make it through the world now. But we end up finding that, we often cannot keep the pace up that it takes to maintain the lifestyle that we developed in our younger years.
Yeah.
Our overhead gets high. Bills come at us. Things happen. We learn that dealing with people can be very challenging. You start running a big business. I've got employees that have 50, 60,000, clients that have 50, 60,000 employees. One of my clients owns 50,000 commercial real estate properties, one of the richest men in the world. So my point is, there's an example of someone who's really in the king stage, right? Or the queen stage, but it comes with, remember, when we build our kingdom, we're in the warrior stage. So we're full of fire. I'm going to own this. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to have a big business, right? And then by the time we get to be about, depending on how well you take care of yourself, somewhere between about 45, earlier today, because most people don't know how to take care of themselves, but somewhere between around 40 and 50, we face a thing called a midlife crisis, and we realize it takes so damn much energy to own all this stuff and to protect it and to maintain it, and that people can drive you goddamn crazy, and you get exhausted, and that's where you get trapped. If you don't have the willingness to downsize and to get clear on what's really important to you at that time in your life, then you go through a crisis and you burn yourself out. And a lot of people have to get a disease in order to get the rest, you see, because it's politically correct to get a disease and go rest. But in our culture, it's not politically correct to say, well, guys, I'm tired today. I'm not coming to work, and you're going to have to work harder by yourself to pay the bills because I need a vacation. Well, when it looks at you, as soon as the boss walks out the door, nothing gets done. That's one of the things you learn owning a business, right? When the owner's away, the cats do play. So the point I'm making is, we reach this point where we cannot maintain that youthful exuberance of the warrior, and we've often built such a big kingdom to serve our egos that we don't realize we cannot continue to carry that kind of load. So if we don't go through a process of getting clear about what's honestly important to us and what we really need to fulfill our sense of connection to life and to the world, and to make our journey, our human journey on earth, meaningful, then we go into a midlife crisis, or we get a disease, we get sick, we become someone else's responsibility, we become a codependent. So we fall backwards to the child stage, and someone else ends up paying for it, or we die. So you're at the transition now to the final stage, which I call the wise man or wise woman stage, and that's where you realize what's most important. So how this ties into what we were saying is, when we're in the child stage, we're just doing what we're told to do. So if you're an athlete, you just do what your coach tells you to do. You don't question it because you don't know what to question. Mm-hmm. When you're in the warrior stage, you do whatever your buddies are doing, but you try to do it better, harder, and faster, because if you can do that, then you're acknowledged, you're loved, and you feel valued. And even if it causes you to lose skin, break bones, or whatever, as long as you can figure out how to do it again, you're okay. And you just keep going. And if you got to use drugs or coffee or stimulants or wraps or straps or props or enemas or whatever the hell anyone else is doing, you'll do it, because your identity is so trapped in your performance,
right,
that if you can't maintain the performance, you actually feel like a nobody. So it can lead to a very deep emotional crisis and a loss of a sense of self.
I feel like he's
I feel like-
describing me right now.
Are you talking to me?
I'm in the warrior stage, and I don't want to be in the king
I
queen
think-
stage.
Yeah,
Yes, well, you know, that's a problem too, because
It is a problem.
You know,
I think it's more of a problem than anybody.
yeah,
If I start crying, it's okay.
keep going. Yeah, that's part of the healing, right? That's part. This is which brings up a point. A man's not really a man until he has equal access to his feminine side.
Yeah.
We've created an entire culture that downplays a man's ability to be in touch with his emotions and to cry and to share his feelings. And so what happens is all that stuff gets bottled up. And there's a book in my library, and the title of it is very true. Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And I work with all sorts of the best athletes in the world and people with diseases, and I would say 85% of those cases I have to work on feelings that were buried in men, especially because it was not manly to be honest about their feelings. And so we've got all these tough guys that are like crying little boys inside, and until we can meet the little boy and let him cry and really share what it is that we need emotionally, or what kind of support we need, or be honest about being tired, or be honest about, honey, I can't keep this business going like this anymore, or whatever it is, if we don't deal with that, then that energy gets trapped in our glands, our organs, and our tissues, and it creates disease. It mirrors itself. The psychic energy mirrors itself in the tissue. So trapped emotions are blockages, which leads to circulatory blockages, which leads to reduction in oxygen levels, which leads to reduction in energy levels, which means the immune system can't support you, and now you got diseases like cancer going on. So coming, into the wise man or wise woman phase for a man especially requires that one be brave enough, and this requires a higher level of bravery than anything in a boxing ring, right? For you guys to actually meet the woman inside of you, the feminine, and connect to that person and be honest about it, it would be scarier for you than almost anything any of your buddies could ever throw at you.